Hi, Howard. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well, Sharon. I hope you're well.
I'm very well, and I'm sure you are sort of in the lovely Lanzarote. I think you said that you are right now. So thanks for making time to come and have today's chat.
It's an absolute pleasure. It gets a chance to get me out of the sun. I'm not a big sun worshipper. When a good lady half out there is sunning herself to death, I prefer the cool. So yeah, it gives me a good excuse to sit inside.
Oh no, that's really appreciate it. Now, um, you know, let's just say for you know before we get into our detailed conversation, obviously you and I have known each other for a while. Howard, you work with Jump Advisory with Paul, but you're better placed. Just give us a top line overview for listeners about you, your background, and what you do now.
Well, it could be a long conversation. So
Condense
I'm
it.
30 plus years in recruitment. I'm 30 plus years into recruitment. Started before the internet. So started without even desktops, roller desks, and things like that. I was an IT
Yeah.
contract recruiter. Went just short of 10 years in my first company. Reasonable good biller. Moved to another company, to Computer People, which was part of the Adecco group, as a manager, and started to build. This is when my sort of management sort of style came in. I started to build businesses or build offices based on culture, based on that, and started to grow.
Mhm.
Within 2-3 years, was a director on the board and working from there. And left there about, I think it was 9 years I was there. Sort of fell out of love really with a big recruitment and started to work with small recruitment agencies. Ended up
Mhm.
opening my own recruitment agency, which moved on, and then started working on an advisory level, but going back to my roots at Adecco and Computer People, because we started to work with Paul Jacobs, who was the head of Office Angels. Now Dave Pye's with us, who was part of Spring, and we
Right.
bought Spring in the end, etc. Although
Mhm.
David moved on at that stage. So Jump seems to have this sort of nice circle of how we've all come together. And now we're helping, I think we're now just over excess of 200 recruitment agencies that we're working with in the UK and abroad. We've got offices in America, places in Australia, Malta and places like that. So we're now right at the sort of heart of recruitment, from solo businesses right up to some really large businesses, where we're helping shape and develop their recruitment strategies, their recruitment delivery, their management teams, etc., which I'm sure we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And you and I have had a number of conversations, over recent months about what's happening in the market. And we just thought that today would be a good opportunity to perhaps take some elements of those conversations, but go into a bit more detail, because a lot has been happening. Companies have been experiencing various challenges depending what sector they're in. But we've only got so long today. You and I can probably talk forever, but from your experience and the work that you guys do, what would you say are maybe the three most common challenges that you find businesses, are dealing with right now?
So when you asked me to come on this, I looked at this and thought, okay, look at across our clientele and look at what happens in our clientele, and then look at what I'm hearing from the REC, from the team network, from other areas, and what's actually happening. And I think the first one is always going to be the same, and it's the attracting and retaining recruiters into your own business. But I also think
Mm,
we now should be adding that how you develop your billers, because I think that has now
mm,
become one of the questions that they're asking from there.
yeah.
And then what's strung onto that was, I think now lots of recruitment agencies are suddenly having the sort of realization that they've got to do proper business development, and business
Yeah.
development has changed and it's coming a
Mm,
very different circle. Buying habits have changed. So we've got to
mhm.
look at how we sort of build our business development. And notice I'm not using the word new business development, because it's development of all business. So
Business.
we've got to look
Yeah.
at that. And I also think the sort of final one that is everyone is looking at, and depending on what they're doing with it, will depend on how successful they'll be. And I think this will give lots of recruitment agencies a significant business advantage. But what technology they're actually using, and how they're developing that
Mm,
technology, and how they're going to use that
mm,
technology within the business. And we've had this conversation before, and I don't think technology will ever replace the human part of recruitment. But
No,
what
I
it will
agree.
do,
Mm,
it will allow recruiters more time to
yeah.
build deeper, more meaningful relationships with their client base and with
Mm,
their candidate base. 'Cause I think the candidate base
mm,
gets very overlooked at some stages. So they're
yes.
the three areas that I think are the key areas that
Mm,
I'm seeing that recruitment businesses that are being successful.
yeah.
And let's say over the last 18 months, when the surge of recruitment happened after the downturn, due to lockdown, etc., there was a huge surge, and then the
Absolutely.
market fell away. Those
Mm,
that carried on building during that fall away time, it's looking at what they've done and looking at how they're doing it and looking at
yeah.
what we've done with the clients that we're working with, who've then implemented those type of strategies. They seem to
Mm,
have had very little downtime, irrespective
yeah.
of what market they're in. And that's a
Yeah.
genuine comment, irrespective of what market they're in, because you're always going to get, well, I'm in that market and I'm not seeing that. Well, there's a genuine thing that we've got to talk about that
Yeah.
will help people to understand that. I think most recruitment agencies think that they are very, very embedded in the marketplace, where I think most recruitment agencies, if we're really honest, are obscure in their own marketplace,
Mm,
but it's our own vanity that doesn't believe that.
mm,
I
yeah.
remember having this conversation with a really high-end recruitment agency who have a very, very small marketplace. And about a couple of weeks ago in London, having that conversation, and I said, okay, I want you to write down on a piece of paper how many candidates you think have started a brand new job in your marketplace today. And those figures ranged from 20 to 30 to 100 to 150. And this is meant to be a really exclusive marketplace. We're talking 300k salaries plus headhunting business. And all I said, okay, if we take that figure, even take your lowest figure and times it by 10, that's probably somewhere where we'll get to the marketplace. That's how big
Mm,
your marketplace really is. And that's still only scraping it. So the question I've got to ask you now is, how many of those people did you place? And
mm,
they were just like, oh my God, I suddenly thought how many people are actually getting placed and I'm not placing them. Right. So now you start
yeah.
to think that you are very obscure in your own marketplace. So that's the bit that we've got to start to think. And we can develop a different mindset that we are obscure and we're constantly then trying to promote ourselves into our marketplace, both into the client and candidate marketplace. But that also then helps retain or starts to retain your staff, but starts to
Mm,
attract new staff because more people start to see you. Because again, even
yeah.
when we were, and I'll give you an idea of that, when computer people bought Spring and we looked at the overlap of client base, there was less than 5% overlap. And we were probably the first,
Wow.
one of the top two or three biggest recruitment agencies in the country in IT at the marketplace at the
Mm,
time. When we bought Spring IT, and at that time, they were probably about seventh or eighth.
mm,
5% overlap, and
wow.
that just blew my
Mm,
mind. It just said
yeah.
we are genuinely obscure. We
Yeah.
were 300 million business. We are obscure.
Well, I mean, look, let's kind of like sort of take those three areas then, and just go one by one, but pick up on what you were just saying there in terms of, I guess, talent, and then that talent being able to, understand the market and start doing client acquisition. But let's just stick with talent at the moment, and hiring talent into your business, retaining it and developing it, as you say. What do you think are some of the key reasons why companies are not retaining talent?
So I think there's one reason, and it doesn't matter who you speak to. Okay,
Mm,
this is the reason what happens. We recruit for a position and we recruit based on skills. We
mm,
remove people from those positions because of their behaviors. So if we start to think, let's stop recruiting for a position and start to recruit for the team and look at what behaviors and attributes you want for your team, then you'll start to get a better rounded business, irrespective of whether you're one or two
yeah,
people in business or 150, 200 people in a business. If you start to recruit for your team and you start to put people into that team and look at the team ethos, then your team will go far. And
Yeah.
I remember sort of doing this when I first walked into Computer People. My job was to stop an office that was absolutely at war. I had to pick up the contract team, pick up the perm team, and help develop that. And what I realised that all of these people had very different behaviours, very different beliefs. And once we start to get the people that were the most destructive people out of the business, and then started to recruit people in that had the right behaviours and the right beliefs that fitted with everybody, then did we see a huge change in productivity, in results. And what we saw was the retention of those people, that they stayed for longer, they build more money. And so that first thing is you've got to understand is what are the behaviors that you want in your business, and look at it as a team environment. Don't start to look at, I need a recruiter, I need a resourcer.
No.
Start thinking about the bigger team environment and start to say, right, what type of people do I want in my business, full stop. And
It's kind of
the
like,
bit. And
it reminds me, I suppose, let's say, higher on attitude, and that attitudinal aspect being, related to the values that you want in the business, and from the values that then leads on to the behaviors that align with those values and bring those values alive. So it very much kind of makes me think, of that old phrase, hire on attitude, not skill. You can give people the skill, can't you? You can train them, but you need, as you say, that right set of behaviours to work with.
It's interesting when we start to build business strategies for companies. That's the first thing we ask them. Is one of the first things we go into is like, talk to me about what your values are, what your beliefs are, what behaviours that you want. And they start to list all of these values and all these beliefs, and that's their values and beliefs. Okay, right now let's look at your team. How well do they replicate them?
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that they've got, my big biller doesn't replicate any of those. That's a real pain. Or so what you got to start thinking is, what are your genuine values and beliefs? And you know this from a marketing point of view. Lots of companies go out to marketing companies and go, can you write me our set of values and beliefs? Yeah, we can all write values and beliefs and have them written up on a board and on a wall and on our website. But if you don't believe them and don't recruit to them, then there's a massive mismatch. And this will go into when we talk about selling to clients and candidates, that they're now looking at that social proof of, if I speak to someone, do I get the same value and belief as what your website is selling and what your marketing and how you're marketing and what your brand is displaying? Because if you don't, then it starts to erode your sale and it starts to erode your capabilities.
Absolutely.
It erodes the trust of your client and your client. And this then stops people retaining your people, but also stops attracting your people. So understanding what your values and behaviors are, and every company has different values and different behaviors, and challenging people on those and say, I just don't want the cliched, we're honest, we have integrity, etc. We're authentic. Yeah, right. Okay. Tell me what that actually means. Okay. So why, when I walked in, did I not see this when I walked through the door? Why not? Why am I experiencing these type of things? And that's the start of the process. So if you start to understand your values and your behaviors and how they work, then you should then be building a recruitment process around those, that then you look at values and behaviors first and foremost. Then you look at the will to do the job. Is the person going to do the job that you require? And every recruitment job is different. Some might be 9 to 5, some you're at 6 in the morning, some you're working, odd hours, etc., etc. So every recruitment job is different on that thing. So the will to do the job is really important. And then start to look at the skills. Yeah. Because I keep saying this, that you can have the right skills, but if you don't have the behaviours, within 6 months you'll be annoying me so much that I want to remove you from the business. You can have the right skills, but you haven't got the will to do the job. Then again, you're never going to succeed. So behaviours, the will to do the job, and then skills, I think are the things that you start to look at. And then, you've got to start to think it's about the team. It's not about the position.
Yeah. Which is an interesting one, isn't it? In terms of building a team where there is that team element, and it's not, and that means that people can collaborate, they can share knowledge, they can share networks, and they can do more cross-selling and upselling, rather than it being, well, this is kind of like this is my desk, this is my little silo, and nobody's going to get any of it, which I mean, if you think about that from a behavioural point of view, I imagine that kind of behaviour, it's just not going to match, is it? A business that's looking to really grow and scale, which kind of leads me on in a way to, so you work out what the right behaviours are, who is going to be a team fit. You then develop the skill set, but that kind of leads on quite nicely to what you were saying in terms of, you can't just leave it at that if you want this person to stay, to grow, to evolve in the business, to progress, then there's that development piece as well, isn't there?
So it's interesting that you start to look at recruitment companies and you start to look at those that have got a revolving door, and you start to understand why they have a revolving door. The first reason is because they have poor behaviours and they're removing people because of behaviours. And then you start to look at the people who are leaving voluntarily. They're either leaving because they don't like the behaviours they're getting from the person or the managers, the teams, etc. So they leave, or they're not getting developed themselves. And you start to read all this sort of data that's coming out now. Yes, money's still very high on someone's agenda on what they want.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is all about self-development. And I think, and I'm sure you've heard me quote this a number of times. I think, when you start to look at certain things, Muhammad Ali said he trains hard so he can fight easy. I think we recruit easy we train easy and recruit hard. And I think we've got to start to change that around. We've got to start to train hard so we can make recruitment easier. And therefore having 2 days worth of training, a week's worth of training, etc. That is so old school nowadays. And there's a reason why we've got a huge attrition rate in year one. So I'm thinking, some of the clients I'm working with at the moment, we're building, here's an initial 13-week training package for the first 13 weeks. Here's a training package for the second 13 weeks. Because the question is, when does a recruiter become profitable for you? And you usually become profitable after 12 months. So if you can start to get that new recruit through 12 months, and that doesn't matter whether they've got recruitment experience or not, you're training them development to recruit in your style, in your behaviors, with your values, okay?
Yeah.
And therefore we should be thinking about that should be constantly going on. So I have a full 12-month training profile for people, and let's swap these in and let's work them. Where I've started to see the companies that have actually done this and done it religiously, they're now seeing a huge uptake in the amount of money that the first year that people actually bill in the first year. They're seeing less people drop out, and there's also seeing those people that are now in the second and third year are billing an excessive amount of money because they've been constantly trained and constantly developed.
They've had solid foundations. Yeah.
But what also that does, it then leaks back to that team ethos, because you're bringing someone new in, you're training, but you can now, you're 6 months ahead of this person. I want you to come and help on train on this. You're 3 months, help on train this. You're 18 months down the line. So now all of a sudden you can start to bring your team in, and now it becomes a real team conveyor belt where everyone's helping each other to get up and get training. And it's interesting, the amount of people that get pushed out of recruitment really early, because we've set these huge expectations on them and they can't deliver those expectations. So every time I sit with a client and say, what's the easiest way to make money from someone new in the person, they go, placing candidates. Right, okay. So rather than chasing jobs, how many jobs have you got on that you're not placing into? Oh, we've got loads of jobs we're not placing into. Right, let's look at those jobs and let's start trying to find candidates for those jobs. Let's get the consultant finding candidates, because the more candidates that you actually have in play, the more you will bill, rather than chasing clients. And that's the hardest part, to open up a new client, especially when you haven't got any product, or you haven't got any knowledge of the actual marketplace. So develop the candidate skills first, and then start to develop the client skills. What you suddenly might find is that you've got people who are really good at resourcing, but aren't very good at new business development. Great. Get them carrying on resourcing. You might find then the flip side, you've got someone who's great at resourcing, but really loves new business development and business development. Great. So you can start to mold what that person is actually doing. And therefore this 360 model, it dissolves quite a lot, and you have people doing the right thing. So now we're back to the team strength rather than individual strengths. And again, you go
Yeah.
back, I look at my recruitment career, and I'm, open to saying we removed people from the business far too early because we didn't think they had the right skills. But they were great at finding candidates, but they weren't great at kicking down doors and opening new
Right.
clients. When actually they could have been brilliant business at helping other
Yeah.
people who. I mean, I'll
Yeah.
go myself. I hated the candidate side of the marketplace, but loved opening doors. And I
Mm,
started to really excel when I got a resourcer, because that resourcer took that pressure off me of finding candidates, but
yeah.
opened up. I think I doubled the following year the
Yeah.
amount of money I was billing, because that person was finding candidates, and I could now concentrate on developing my own clients and developing new business clients.
And I guess as well that excuse me, that feeds into that development piece, isn't it? That over time, that you really, the more you work with somebody, the more you understand what are their true strengths, and actually, develop and play to those strengths. Because often, I think, certainly from my past life in a way of corporate training and everything, the times I've seen managers, talk about investing huge amounts of time helping people who were really struggling, and then they lose the top performers because they're not spending any time there, or they're not necessarily focusing on people and supporting their strengths to be enhanced. And the reality is actually the people who were struggling had strengths, and if they'd spent time focusing on those strengths and helping that person maybe evolve in a different direction rather than that role that they were in right there and then, they probably would have got a damn sight more out of that individual than they ended up. So I guess that's what you're saying as well, isn't it? In
Right, okay. So are you going to start from there? Are you? Yeah.
I'll start from there. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, for me, the reality is that, there's lots of talk, isn't there, about 360 model, and is it all out of date, old hat, etc., etc. And there's lots of other models. The reality is that there are lots of models, and it's about finding a model that works right for your business. And yet, I guess what I'm hearing you say is that you can start off training people to be able to do all the different things that perhaps are encompassed in a 360 model, and as they evolve, they learn, they grow, they demonstrate their results. You will find out what that individual strengths are, and then that model can evolve. And if it's a case of they're a resourcer or they become an account manager, but somebody else absolutely excels in business development, well then they can evolve down that track, can't they? So, there's a starting point, and I guess you're talking about having really strong training foundations in place and not cutting corners on that, and letting things evolve and having that ongoing development.
So I remember when I was running my own business, the first thing I did with anybody that came in was we trained them for 13 weeks on finding candidates. And we had this young lad come in, never done recruitment before, great behaviours, great values, and we taught him how to resource. And he was brilliant at resourcing.
Mm.
And after about a year, he said, I really want to push sales, but I'm a bit worried. And so I set it up and said, right, okay, I'm happy to train you. I'm happy to develop you into sales. Okay. But I want you to have this one thought. If it doesn't work, you've got a brilliant job here as a resourcer.
Yeah.
And so he tried, and it didn't quite work out. So we went
Right.
back to resourcing. About another 6 months later, he says, I think I'm ready for another go at that. So we gave him another go. And again, he says, there's just something about, I just don't like doing the client work, but I love resourcing. And so he ended up carrying resourcing for us. He became a great account manager, but it's giving them the opportunity to see where their strengths are. And if they want to push that boat a little bit, then fine. So yeah, I don't think 360 is dead either. I think some people are brilliant at 360, but some people are also brilliant at resourcing. Some people are just good at client management. Some people are good at new business development, etc. So find out where their strengths are and developing it. And this is the bit where I keep saying to clients, where do you where do you make your money? And they said, well, we make our money out of placing candidates. Right, okay, so if you want to get someone up because your expectations is you want them billing really quickly, don't get them doing 360 straight away where they've got to find clients, and if by the end of 13 weeks you might have made one placement, etc. Get them finding candidates that can fill the jobs that you're already working. That way you'll make them place 3, 4, 5 candidates by the end of 13 weeks. Then we can start to see what they're good at, because not only are they new to you, but you're new to them as well. So there's that learning curve to see how they learn, what they're good at, what their skills are, and then start to develop. So that first 13 weeks to me is all about finding candidates. Find candidates, train the person to find candidates better than the best person in the business can find candidates. That way you will always have someone in your business that's skilled. If they then can move on to do 360 or account management or new business sales, brilliant. Train them to do that and develop them to do that. But always give them, this is an option. If you're great at this, this is an option. Great, you're great at that as well. That gives you more options. So that they don't feel that they've failed and therefore look to leave.
Yes.
And I think we make that push too soon sometimes. We genuinely make that push too soon.
Yeah. I mean, just picking up on, so, you focus somebody on the candidate side, and then it evolves into, new business opportunities. So picking up on client acquisition, because that was something, that you highlighted as a big challenge that you've seen. And, perhaps the difference in terms of how we do BD today compared to the past, and the stages of it as well, because I mean, I've been sat round, tables at different events, just like you have over recent months, hearing people being really honest and at times quite vulnerable about the lack of business development that they've been doing over, going back a number of years. And of course, they realize now that it's not the same. So, from your perspective, obviously we know that it's different, but, what I guess from, what are you seeing as the major changes, and what do you think, what are you sharing in terms of the stages of client acquisition that people need to consider today?
So I think the first thing we've got to understand is that the buying mentality has changed. Buying habits have changed.
Absolutely.
Think about anything that you buy at the moment. The first thing you do is you go onto Google. I want to buy something, I'll find it on Google. And then you find a plethora of different prices on Google. So you look at the cheapest, and then the first thing you look at is the reviews. So you look for social proof. They might be cheap, but all of a sudden, they've got poor delivery, they've got poor customer service, or for a couple of quid more, I can buy it there. So everyone's doing that. So quite a lot of the decision-making process, when you're putting things out on LinkedIn, on other social media platforms, you're sending email campaigns, they're then tracking you through all the social media platforms to see what your social proof is like. So having a really good social footprint is the first place that I'd look at. And this is the bit that we talk about yourselves, that first acquisition engagement stage is all about your social media stage, your email campaigns, etc., and driving those people to your website, giving that person an understanding of your social footprint so they can make a decision whether they feel that you're good enough to work with or not. They make that decision. But it's not just the clients that are making that decision, it's candidates. Because when you put something out onto social media, you don't know whether their client's reading it or a candidate's reading it.
No.
So we've got to stop. I think some of the recruitment marketing that lots of people do are just very poor, because it's like how to write a CV. Here's 3 questions that you should ask at the end of an interview. Here's this. But most of the market isn't in that stage. But when you start thinking about candidate acquisition, I start to think about, okay, when does a candidate start to think they want to move? They don't think about it 2 or 3 days before they move. They probably think about it 12 months before they move. So we should be trying to engage them at that stage. Therefore, we can get more candidates into the process earlier, maybe get more exclusive candidates. But then we should start to think about that engagement we're going out to clients. And this is the bit. You've got your client acquisition stage, where that initial engagement stage is all about your social media. Now, it doesn't matter whether they're a buying client, a lapsed client or a new client? Because what we tend to find, and again, I go to clients, go, right, give me a list of buying clients. And they give me a long list of buying clients. Go, when did that client last buy from you? Oh, 6 months ago. Well, they can't be a buying client if they haven't bought for 6 months. So I'm saying now, if you're, certain markets after a month, if they stop buying after a month, they're no longer a buying client. Most markets probably after 3 months, they're no longer a buying client. So you should have a email campaign and a social media campaign for your buying clients. Remind them what services that you have. Remind them what services that you do. Because again, we think we sell to our clients once and they remember everything that we do.
I had this conversation yesterday. Yeah.
You're doing perm, great. Do you know you're doing contract? Oh, we didn't know you did contract.
Yeah.
So we've got to, again, it goes back to that, we're obscure, but we're not even selling well to our own client base because we believe we've got a really good relationship when actually we've probably got a very relationship with one person. But next door is a person that's doing twice as much. Next person to that is another person doing twice as much. So that email campaign is all about growing that social footprint and grading social proof. So your testimonials and your Google reviews, etc., become really important. And what recruiters are great at, they're great at asking for testimonials and they're great at getting off a client. So I'm going to say, right, prove how good your client value proposition is and your candidate value proposition. When was the last time you had an unsolicited testimonial given to you? Because you give unsolicited testimonial. You go to a restaurant and have a great meal at a restaurant, you give an unsolicited review of that restaurant. If you go on a really nice holiday, you give an unsolicited review. So if you did that to your clients and your candidates, and you start to get unsolicited reviews, they get a far better review. So that initial engagement stage is all about your social media presence, your email presence, your digital footprint going into that client. So it starts to put your brand into the candidate and the client's mindset.
Yeah, on the same page with that.
The next bit is the bit I think lots of recruiters have forgotten. And I think this has gone full circle. Okay, so when I first started in the 90s, every client was saying, oh, I get 20 to 30 phone calls every day from different recruitment agencies. Now they get 20 to 30 email campaigns every single day. And when we went and talked to the end clients and said, right, what is it that you want? They go, oh, we want someone to bring up and talk to us about it. So if we think 80% of the sell is done at that social engagement, to convert the sell, that 20% is a human stage.
Interaction.
And so calling your clients, going out and meeting your clients, going out and visiting your clients, going out and finding what you want, that they want is really important. And I think what we tend to do is recruiters are great at being trained as build the pain, build the pain, build the pain. I'm thinking, well, if I start to build the pain with you and start to tell you that you were doing things wrong constantly, that's what it spells in your mind. But if we change that conversation and say, right, what can I do, Sharon, to make you look good? How do I make you look good? Well, I need to do this in this project. I need to get that done on this. I need to get these people in here. Right, if I can help you do that to make you look good, that gives you a very different thought process of how you're working with me, because I'm trying to make you look good. So building really strong relationships. And I think, lots of recruiters believe, I think there's 5 stages in relationship. There's that contact stage, then engagement, trust, loyalty, and advocacy. And what I tend to think most people think trust and loyalty when actually you're at contact and engagement at most, because you don't really know what that client wants. You don't know when it wants. And again, the acid test on that I say to this is, okay, most clients plan their workforce for the following 12 months, probably in Q4 or Q1 of each year, depending on what they're doing from the financial point of view. Okay. How often are you invited into that conversation? Oh, never get invited into that conversation.
Yeah.
But we think that every piece of recruitment is a distressed purchase because someone's left. No, some of this might have been planned 6, 12, 18 months ago. But we haven't been let in on that. So we've got to build a better relationship. And that first one is going out and meeting your clients. The next stage is the hearts and minds stage. So consistently delivering a great service, consistently improving that service, consistently helping their client with data, with information, which helps them attract, retain. And we constantly talked about the client's EVP. But the question is, how are you taking that EVP and putting that into the candidate marketplace so it attracts candidates and brings more candidates to you? So we should be thinking about not just the candidate's the client's EVP. We should think about the candidates.
Candidate one.
So we can then match the candidate's EVP to the client's EVP. So all of a sudden, we're now giving a different viewpoint. We can help the client on lots of different things. And the final part of that is the retention phase. And so I always think that we seem to forget that we're not selling to a client. I'm not selling to Superfast. I'm selling to Sharon. Now, Sharon moves on, someone else at Superfast comes in. So who am I selling to now? So you start thinking that every client, you've got a stranger, prospects, customers, and hopefully you get that customer to a promoter. But I reckon for every customer you've probably got 4 or 5 strangers that could be prospects. Constantly I see this. And, again, I'm working with a client that we started to work with this year, and all of a sudden they've gone into their existing client base and they've now got double the amount of work out of their existing client base because those clients didn't know what they did. They didn't know that they still did that. They didn't know they were still doing this. We didn't know that they were doing that. So we've done that. We then start to have more and more meetings. They're now coming with more and more things. We're now talking about that hearts and mind things and talk about that. We're taking their EVP and putting it into the market and bringing candidates constantly to them. And all of a sudden, the conversation, the relationship with their existing client base has massively
improved. Goes to
improved.
another level, doesn't it?
Now start to do that with, guess what? Their lapsed client base. The ones that haven't been sold for 3 months, but probably 18 months, 2 years was the last time most of them got sold to. They're doing that to those clients. They're now getting those clients coming on board. And guess what? Both the buying and lapsed clients are now promoters, and not just promoting within the business, but they're getting calls now from, I hear you're working with so-and-so, so-and-so, they've this, blah, blah, can you help us with this? And so because they've developed that relationship, they're now getting promoters in the business, and that's when you start to get people to that trust, loyalty, and advocacy stage. But we just think that that's because we ring them up occasionally and talk to them occasionally. I go to some certain businesses where they've got 60, 70% of their businesses in one client, but they haven't visited them for 3 or 4 months. I'm going, what are you doing? Why haven't you been? So all of a sudden that acquisition then becomes a very different thing. So I think your social media engagement is really important. Your email campaign should be consistently going. Break your email campaigns into 3 different buckets: new business, existing business, and lapsed business.
Absolutely.
Have a absolute meeting strategy. Go out to meet your clients. Talk about work, talk about projects, talk about what would make their candidate and the client look good to them. Constantly grade what your business is doing for that client. Okay. So if I've got loads and loads of perm work, am I also trying to find out whether they've got contract work? Am I trying to find out whether they've got other business work? Have they got temp work? Am I trying to find that out? So constantly do that. We then talk about, once we're in that stage, and this is what lots of companies tend to forget, is there's normally about 6 to 8 decision makers in most in businesses. That decision, you're probably talking to the person right at the bottom of the chain. So who's the person further up the chain? So we should be talking to them. So as the owner of the business, I should be speaking to the owner of that business. We should be speaking to more of the management line. We should be speaking to the recruitment line. But it's all the time we have different conversations. So now what I'm doing is I'm taking that responsibility away from a recruiter, and as a business owner, I'm now getting involved in the businesses as well. I'm now getting a deeper layer into that business. I'm getting multiple layers into that business. Therefore, I have different conversations with different people at different stages of the recruitment process. We're thinking of doing this at C-suite level. Okay, now that might not trickle down to the recruitment level for another year, but we know about it. Right, let's give you some information on how that market's working, what's going on in that market, what salary banding like, what it's like, etc. So now we can help them attract people a lot earlier. And again, go back to that client, what they're finding now is that as they're bringing candidates into the marketplace, they're now straight away going out and marketing to these clients and saying, look, I know you don't need this person for another 3 months, but this person's just gone in the marketplace. They're absolutely brilliant. in the temp market, I know you really like this temp. They're just coming back onto the marketplace now. If you move quickly, we can capture this temp. And all these things are starting to happen. So they're getting to the market quicker and faster because they're at a deeper level with the client.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's the bit we've got to really understand, is that for every customer that you have, there are probably 5 or 6 strangers in that customer that isn't buying from you and is buying from somebody else. And some of them might be more powerful than the customer that you've got. Are you working hard to change that customer to a promoter? Are you making that promoter then introduce you to new people? So every time I'm going to a site, I'll be thinking, right, I'm going to go see Sharon, right? Can she introduce me to Denise? Because she could be another buyer.
Yeah. Yeah.
All the time I have reasons why I'm going to my meetings, but then I have in those meetings face to face, I have targets that I want to achieve. And it's not just about pulling a job. It's about introduce me to this person. Can you introduce me to that person? What's happening in this area? What's happening here? So all the time I'm growing my market knowledge and I'm mapping that client out so I can start to really make sure that I'm maximizing my return on investment in that client. And that is all about, going through those 4 acquisition stages, but every client will be at the social stage. Every client will be at that human acquisition stage. Every client is at that hearts and minds stage, and every client is at that retention stage. And if we don't treat every client like that, that's why clients drop off. That's why clients disappear. That's why other recruitment agencies take those clients from you, because we are too busy thinking, I've got a real great relationship with that client, and someone else is courting that client. And the majority of the market are still relying on that social media and email campaign and not even doing that human acquisition stage of actually calling the client. 18 months ago, when the market was really busy, clients were throwing jobs at recruitment agencies. They're not doing that anymore.
They're not, no.
If you ring them up, quite a few are.
Yeah.
So the market changes, and you've got to then start to get into that cycle. And it was interesting that we talk about the sales funnel. I'm always put that as a flywheel because it's always going round and round and round. So your client never drops out at the bottom of the funnel. They're always in that flywheel going round. So they're always either in that acquisition stage of engagement, human acquisition, hearts and minds, and retention all the time. I'm always looking at, am I talking to the right strangers? Am I taking them into a prospect? Have I got the right customer? Have I got the right promoters? So all the time I'm growing my knowledge in that client, and it's always moving round and round and round. So yes, I love the sales funnel. I think it is a great thought process and tool. But I'm thinking if I can put it into a flywheel, then nothing ever drops out. The centrifugal force of the flywheel will keep all my clients in there, whether they're buying, lapsed, or new. And the job is to get more from each area, not just from one area.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Now, look, I'm really super conscious of time. Big ask, but let's say in 5 minutes, how would you summarize the tech piece? And I know that's a big ask.
It is. So the tech piece, I think, links back to everything. So if you think about KPIs, we're still very KPI obsessed, but no one's actually measuring what your business makes your business successful. So is it the client meeting? Is it the email campaign? What part actually works? So rather than measuring a consultant on the number of calls they're making, et cetera, measure them on the bits that actually make you money. And AI helps you with that. The other side of AI, I think, is recruitment. You go to all the expos. The expos are great, but they've just become a massive tech show, really. And what we're great at, new shiny things, we go buy it. But what we never do is develop the training of that. You go speak to all the CRMs. Oh, most companies only use 20 to 25% of our CRM capability. So if you trained your people to work on those CRMs better, you'd get more from that CRM. How many people do I go in and say, well, we're going to change your CRM. It's rubbish. Right, let's go talk to your provider first. What do you want it to do? I want it to do this, 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 and this. Right, let's go speak. I never knew it did that. I never knew it did that. So technology, we don't have to move on. We have to get the best out of our technology first and foremost. If that technology then can be improved, then yes, upgrade your technology. Absolutely upgrade your technology. Okay. And I always think about what would make my job easier. So what would do the heavy lifting? If I can do that by automation or technology, so I can have more time speaking to candidates and speaking to clients, then that's what I should be doing. So all the time I'm looking at my technology and go, right, what can I do? So you think about your email campaigns. How many people do I still meet who say, yeah, we send email campaigns. Okay, what's your open rate? Oh, I've no idea. What do you mean you've no idea? Well, I can't find my open rate. So let me guess it right. You've sent 1,000 emails out. You don't know who's opened them? No. So you could call all 1,000 and one person might have opened it, and that might be the 1,000th person you've called. Where if you knew who'd opened it, you could call that person straight away and have a more intellectual conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
So even little things like that, are there.
Yes.
Everyone's now talking about the power of AI. Okay. So yes, AI is, I think it is a really good thing, but only if it's used correctly. And so, if you want to, make all your job specs and, adverts written in AI, fine. But then you use that element, you use your own behaviors, you lose those behaviors because AI as yet isn't quite good enough. It will get there.
To do that quality-wise. Yeah.
So, yes, you could use it as a framework and then rejig it, rewrite it and work it from there. But I think the power in our systems is, again, it's the connectivity from cradle to grave. So if I have to leave a system to go to another system, then human error starts to creep in. And again, I'm sometimes horrified about the amount of companies that are still running paper timesheets. And yet you could do an electronic timesheet and therefore you cut your error rate. And the error rate would only happen at the client and the candidate's end because they're looking at it and they're making sure that you haven't made any errors. But does that connect into your back office systems? It connect to your payroll system. So it should all link through. So I think we've got to start to think about technology as a cradle to grave system, not individual silos, because in those individual silos, then we get individual pieces of data and that data then gets ignored. So sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, and in a way, it's sort of like, it brings us full circle. Because something that you spoke quite passionately about at the beginning is that development piece and training people, onboarding people for a solid 13 weeks on candidates, finding candidates and then that ongoing development. And here you're saying the same thing. It's about if whatever tech you've currently got, make sure your people can use that really well to its full extent before you go and try the bright new shiny object. So that's quite nice how you've brought us full circle on that. And look, I'd love to chat to you more about tech, but let's kind of like just bring things to a close. Because there's always next time as well. So thank you, because you've shared some fabulous detail, and I know people listening will probably find themselves thinking at times, yes, they might walk away from this with a bit of a long to-do list. And if you are listening to this and you've been driving in the car, I'd really probably encourage you to listen to it again. Sit down with a cup of tea or a glass of wine or whatever you drink, with a notepad and pen, because there's some great sort of suggestions and some good thought-provoking questions I think that you've posed people, Howard. So it's always great talking to you and listening to your thoughts and ideas. So thank you so much for taking time out of your holiday once again. And I look forward to catching up soon.
So do I. I'm going to leave it on one note.
Yeah, go on.
You're right, that comment. There are so many things in here that people could be doing. Yeah. Okay. And my view is this, very simply. Okay. Write them down in a list, then prioritize that list.
Good point. Thank you. Yes.
Do one thing at once.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you try to do 10 things all at the same time, you'll fail all those 10 things. So do one thing at once. And I think, when we write 3-year business plans for people, they go, oh my God, there's so much to do. I said, yeah, but we've got 3 years to do it. Let's do it in the order it should be done in, and the priority it should be done. Yes, that will change as the business grows. So do it that way, rather than doing it all, trying to do it all at once and failing miserably. Do it in a way that it should work, and therefore write your list out, then prioritize that list, and then do one thing and do it well.
Absolutely. And ironically, we literally had that conversation today on one of our super fast circle calls with clients about, difference between tasks and projects, prioritizing them and choosing one and then putting that task or that project into the calendar so that things actually happen. So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Listen, great talking to you. Enjoy the rest of your holiday and catch you soon.
Same to you, Sharon. I'll catch you
Take
soon.
care.
Indeed. Cheers. Bye.
Bye now.